Hey friends, so I know nobody is seeing this yet because I did not schedule it. This was a last minute decision, actually. I haven't even told Mr. C that I was going live. Um, Although he might see it if he's paying attention at work. Anyways, okay, so I'm going to start off with my disclosures. And yes, I got a comment yesterday about, oh, it's an American channel because it starts with disclosures. Well, that's because United States tends to be a litigious country, and there's lots of people that like to be litigious, um, which was evident from my live stream yesterday. Anyways, so my disclosures is all of my comments are my opinion. They are only my opinion, and they doesn't matter what wording I use. They're always my opinion. They don't reflect any legal conclusions nor put forth legal advice because I'm not an attorney. All persons are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and my videos are not court record. So, with that said, this case actually, I was told about it last night, and while I was watching it, I was like, oh, that sounds so familiar. This guy has, he's a self described activist, political reform activist. He sent text messages directly to people within the Lansing Police Department with threats of explosives. Um, and his name is Barry Shiffer. He's a little out there, and this is actually a longer video. It's the whole thing. It was easier. I was gonna do it as just a regular upload, but I decided to go ahead and just jump on here live anyways, and do it just because I thought it would be easier. So let me get the screen up. And I'm going to just go ahead and start this, and you guys decide for yourselves.
On the record, in the matter, the people of the state of Michigan versus Barry Shiffer, file number is 23-00524 FY. Council appearance.
Good morning, Your Honor. Tracy Meyer on behalf of the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Edward Hess on behalf of Barry Shiffer. Mr. Shiffer is seated to my right at the council table.
Yesterday was the date and the time that was set for a preliminary examination. How are we proceeding?
The people are ready to proceed. I've offered to speak to defense counsel about some sort of resolution. He's a habitual for on a 20-year felon, so we have a lot of room to wiggle.
The first part's a little bit boring.
It's not interested in any sort of resolution.
But it lays some
Your Honor, I'm
groundwork for
respectfully
this
asking
case.
that Mr. Shiffer be placed under oath that I may voir dire him as to proceeding with today's hearing and as to his waiver of his right against self-incrimination as to his proposed testimony.
After you raise your right hand, you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury.
Affirm.
Thank you. You can proceed.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Mr. Shiffer, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
You understand today that you're appearing for a preliminary examination, is that correct?
I understand that, yes.
And you understand that you're being charged with a single count of false report of a terrorist threat?
Correct.
And from what the prosecution said, you understand that the prosecution seeks to add a habitual fourth offender notice to your potential felony information?
Yeah, this is the first I've heard of it, but I expected that. Come. Yeah,
Now, you've informed me that you wish to proceed with today's hearing, is that correct?
absolutely.
You informed me that you do not wish to waive today's hearing, is that correct?
I'd like to go through with it. No way.
You informed me that you do not wish to plead guilty or consider any plea offers in this matter, is that correct?
That's for a later date. No.
So this time, you're not asking me to negotiate as far as plea offers go or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Mr. Shiffer, you have informed me several times, but most recently this morning, that you wish me to call you as a witness in this matter. Is that correct?
Correct.
I have informed you that if you are called as a witness, you would be waiving your right against self-incrimination and your right to remain silent. Is that correct?
Correct.
You understand that anything you say will be under oath. Is that understood?
Yes,
You understand that anything you say can be used against you in this proceeding and in any other court proceeding, either in this court or in some other court, for example, federal court.
yes,
You understand that if there's an accusation made that any of your testimony is false, then you could potentially be charged with contempt of court or with perjury.
right, correct,
You understand that I have advised you that any test that you testifying is against my express legal advice, correct?
correct,
You understand that I've advised you that should you seek to testify, I would not have any questions to ask you because I do not believe that it is sound legal strategy for you to testify in this case.
correct,
Therefore, you understand that when I call you to the stand, I will be making a motion to the court to allow you to testify in the narrative without me asking any questions. You understand that?
correct.
Your Honor, I have no further questions from Mr. Shiffer at this time.
Thank you. Any additional preliminary matters before we call our first witness?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Call your first witness.
We'll call Jessica Martin.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury? You are. Thank you. You can have a seat. State your first and your last name and spell them both.
Yes, Jessica Martin, Jessica, Martin, Martin.
You can proceed.
Thank you. Where do you work, ma'am?
The
No
Lansing Police
relation to
Department.
Reno.
And in what capacity do you work there?
I'm the police social work supervisor.
Can you describe to me what that means?
Yeah, so in my role as the police social work supervisor, I respond to assist officers and to referrals from officers in community to support clients with a variety of social service related needs to include mental health, behavioral health, housing needs, older adult, family and juvenile issues, and the like.
So I was unaware that this person even existed within the Lansing Police Department, and I was very happy to see that it does. Back in the day, I know I've said it before, but I went through the police academy because I wanted to become what was a program back then as a county medic, so a paramedic police officer, and I had to do ride-alongs with Lansing Police, and that was one of the biggest things I saw was that the need for mental health care is extreme, like it's bad. It is needed, and it would, and I think does contribute to the reduction in crime, even though it seems like the crime in this area is a lot worse these days. I can only imagine how bad it would be without someone like her there to respond to these types of incidences. Yeah.
And are they clients to you, but in this setting, defendants? Or at that point, not determined?
To me, they are all clients because my role is solely social work. I don't get involved in the criminal side unless it's absolutely necessary.
And what's your training and experience prior to this role?
Prior to this role, I was a police officer for over 16 years at Michigan State University Police Department.
And then after working there, you came here?
Yeah, I was hired by Lansing Police in January of 2022 to do their social work program.
Were you working on February 10th, 2023?
Yes,
And on that date and what continued for certain days, were you contacted by a Barry Shiffer?
Yes.
Do you see Barry Shiffer in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you please identify him?
He's sitting to the right of his attorney wearing a blue prison jumpsuit and white undergarments.
Your Honor, may the record reflect identification.
Any objection?
No objection for this hearing, Your Honor. Thank you.
Identification is noted.
Thank you. How long have you known the defendant?
Several months.
Do you think it's about a year or so?
I would estimate around that time. My contact started with him fairly early into my career at Lansing Police Department.
And how did it first come about that you made contact with him?
I don't recall the exact incident, but as I said, we received referrals from officers for people that they think could benefit from our intervention to connect to resources and support. So somewhere along the line, I received a referral in regards to Mr. Shiffer.
In your contact with him, were you made aware that he has been in and out of Sparrow Hospital?
Yes, those are matters of probate record.
And was that for mental illness?
Yeah, that's my understanding versus the probate records and police records.
And did he talk to you? Let's go back to when you're working on February 10th. Did you have communication from him?
So Sparrow Hospital is a local hospital system, and they have the inpatient psych ward at one of the hospital locations, just so you know. And they do have two separate sides. They have the regular psych ward side, then they have a lockdown side, which is where people that are like a threat, or if they are from a jail or they're under arrest, or like they need to be in 4-point restraints, they are on the lockdown side. I have definitely taken people up there before. It's actually a really nice little hospital. Like I would not mind that place. Oops.
Yes, via text message.
And how do you know that it was him?
That's a phone number that was provided to me by him for us to be able to communicate.
And what was unusual about that text message?
It contained some very direct threats towards various government officials.
What did you do when you received that text?
Because of the direct threats to a named party, I contacted the Lansing Police Department as part of my duty to warn as a mental health professional and notified them of the threats that I had received.
Your Honor, I'm showing defense counsel what's been previously marked as people's proposed exhibit number 1. Can I approach?
You may.
Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize that?
This was the text message that I received from Mr. Shiffer, copies of them.
And is it screenshots?
Yes, from
It-
my phone.
And it's quite lengthy, so it
It
covers
is.
into additional pages, is that true?
Yes, it is.
And if you look it over, does it accurately depict how or what you got on that day?
Yes, it's an exact copy of what I received.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
Not that I can find.
You're not disappointed to move to the admission of people's proposed exhibit number 1?
Any objection?
No objection. Thank you.
People's one is admitted.
And in that text message, can you point out to me where he made the threat?
Yes, in the first part of it, it says, evacuate the Ingham County Circuit Courthouse, contact the bomb squad. I have mailed an unlit pipe bomb to Judge Rosemary Aquilina.
And where is the Ingham County Circuit Court located?
I believe it's on Kalamazoo Street. I don't know the exact address.
And for you court walkers, if you recognize that name, Rosemary Aquilina, she was the Ingham County judge that overheard the Larry Nassar case. So that's why that name might sound familiar to you.
Is it City of Lansing?
Yes,
Ingham County, State of Michigan?
yes, it is.
And is that where Judge Rosemary Aquilina, her office or chambers are located?
To my understanding, yes.
And was that the only text message you received from this individual?
No, there were several messages over, if I recall correctly, the 10th was a Friday. And because this is my work phone, I don't always maintain that when I'm outside of the office. So there were several more messages that were received on other dates following the 10th that when I returned to work on the 13th, I then notified that there were additional messages received.
What did you do with the content of those messages?
Because they were so lengthy and there were so many of them received over the course of the weekend, I didn't feel that I could adequately share them via screenshot. So I copied them from my phone and pasted them into my email verbatim and sent those to the police department officials that were investigating.
Here at this point, I'm showing defense counsel was from previously marked as people's proposed number 2. May approach.
May.
If you're gonna do people's proposed number 2, do you recognize that?
Yes,
Is that an email you sent to yourself?
it is.
And is that contain what you just indicated, the copies of the text messages?
Yes.
Have the messages been altered or changed in any way? You could look them over.
Not that I can.
You're at this point, I move to the admission of people's proposed number 2.
Any objection?
No objection, thank you.
People's 2 minutes.
In that, the text messages, can you give a summary? I guess, let me ask it. Do the threats continue?
Yes.
And they continue throughout? Is that why you chose to pick those, the messages to put into this email?
Yes.
Has the defendant made statements to you about making these threats?
I'm sorry, I guess I'm not sure I understand the question.
Did he ever talk to you about these threats at all?
No, I did not reply to these messages, nor did I have any other contact with him about these specific messages.
Have you asked him about text messages or threats like this before in the past?
Have I asked him about them?
Yes.
He previously has made other more general threatening statements that I did not feel warranted a duty to warn as a violating my confidentiality. So that answers your question.
Did he ever indicate to you that he just wanted to go back to prison?
Yes.
After you turned these messages over to law enforcement, did you have any more contact or did you receive any more messages?
I did not initiate any contact with him. I would have to look at my cell phone, but I believe there were other messages received after this, but they were not anything that would warrant another violation of confidentiality for duty to warn.
Okay. Give me one moment. At this point, I'll just ask to publish people's 1 and 2 to the court and have no further questions.
Publish.
We have to publish.
Yes.
Thank you.
Faucet Sam.
Just so everyone knows, this is Ingham County, which is Lansing, so the capital.
In your contact with Mr. Shiffer, were you aware that he's a person who was homeless?
Yes.
Were you aware that he was a person who struggled with substance use disorder?
We're getting into some HIPAA territory there. I can't comment on his diagnoses or treatment.
Well, this is a court of law, so I'm asking the question.
How she handles
Is
this
there a
is
way to find
beautiful.
that via police records? I mean, he's a client of mine and I am a mental health professional. So unless it's relevant to a threat to somebody, I can't disclose information that he's given me regarding his treatment, his afflictions, his diagnoses.
All right. You remember Exhibit 2, which was the emails that you compiled?
Yes.
Do you remember a reference in that to Mr. Shiffer medicating his unmedicated pain with crack cocaine?
Yes, that is mentioned in the text message.
You testified already that Mr. Shiffer was a person with a probate court record and who's been in and out of mental health treatment. Is that correct?
Yes, there are probate court records that show that. It's my understanding he has a mental order in Lyon as well.
Do you remember that Exhibit 1 described an unlit pipe bomb?
Yes,
Do you remember that Exhibit 1 describes the pipe bomb as being harmless?
yes,
Do you remember that Mr. Shiffer describes himself as being a peacemaker?
yes,
Do you remember that Mr. Shiffer indicates that the bomb will not injure or kill Judge Rosemary Aquilina?
I do recall a statement in there, yes.
Do you recall in Exhibit 2 a description of unlit pipe bombs?
I would have to look. There were a lot of messages.
Okay. Do you remember in Exhibit 2 a description of sticks of harmless dynamite?
Remember the word dynamite. I don't know that I remember the rest of the context.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness and show her Exhibit 2, please? I'm not sure where Exhibit 2 is, Your Honor. I'll tell you in a second. Page 2, bottom. All right, please look at the last big paragraph on page 2 and look up when you've read that. Did you read that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, I'm going to return this to the court. Ms. Martin, did reading that paragraph help you refresh your memory of the contents of Exhibit 2?
Yes.
Did that paragraph contain a description of unlit pipe bombs?
Yes.
Did it contain a description of harmless dynamite?
It did.
Very well. Now, your contact with Mr. Shiffer as your client had to do with items other than these two exhibits, right? You had communications with Mr. Shiffer other than the contents of these two exhibits?
Yes.
And have you met him in person prior to today?
Yes.
Now, you did note in the exhibits there were what I will describe as complaints regarding Judge Rosemarie Aquilina, is that correct?
There were statements regarding. Yes.
Statements complaining about her past behavior, alleged behavior towards Mr. Shiffer? Her capacity as a judge?
There were statements that he did not
You
care
guys
for the
thought
way
Kim
she had handled
Blandino-
this case, I believe, or something of that nature.
Just
Okay.
wait.
And you would describe
Just
these
wait,
communications
he
as
has
lengthy
nothing on
and
this guy.
rambling, would that be correct?
Yes.
Is this characteristic of Mr. Schiffer's past contact with you?
Yes.
Is it true that these communications contain a list of grievances that Mr. Schiffer has?
Yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
I made this witness to excuse.
Yes.
Thank you, Martin, you made the excuse from the
Thank
stand.
you.
Call your next witness.
Detective Sergeant Troy Johnson.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to provide is true to the best of your knowledge, information, or belief?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You can have a seat, Detective Sergeant. Please state your first and last name and spell them.
Troy Johnston, TROY JOHNSTON.
Thank you. Proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Where do you work, sir?
Work for the Michigan State Police.
And in what capacity do you work there?
I'm a detective sergeant assigned to the major crime unit in the city of Lansing.
Did there come a point in time where you and fellow Michigan State Police Detective Sergeants were involved with the case for Barry Shiffer?
Yes,
And did it have something to do with a threat that was made to the Ingham County Circuit Courthouse?
yes.
And what did members of the Michigan State Police and or surrounding law enforcement agencies do in reference to that threat?
The bomb squad was contacted. There were canines contacted to do a sweep of the Ingham County Prosecutor's Office and the 30th Circuit Court building.
Did the fact that the text message indicated that it was an unlit bomb, did the word unlit deter any activity from law enforcement?
No,
Did the fact that it was indicated as a harmless dynamite, does that change any response?
No.
I have nothing further.
Prosecute.
Sir, were you involved with the search of the building?
I was not.
Were you made aware of the results of the search of the building?
Yes,
Is it true that no explosive materials, bombs, or any other matter was found as a result of this search?
yes.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you, Detective Sergeant. You can call your next witness.
The people rest, Your Honor.
Of the defense to call their witnesses.
Thank you. The defense calls Barry Shiffer to the stand.
You raise your right hand again. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury.
Affirm.
Thank you. You can have a seat, sir.
So, this video is likely to get demonetized
Okay, you've been
because
fully
of
advised of your rights
subject
that
of
you
it.
waived already on the record. You want
the
to
ticker
continue
along
that
the bottom
waiver,
is
sir?
a link to
Yes.
my PayPal if you'd like
Okay,
to directly
Mr.
donate
Yes, you
and
can
help.
continue.
Your Honor, I have no
Support my
questions for
channel.
Mr. Shiffer at this time, believing that my professional obligations prohibit me from asking you any questions because it is my legal opinion that any testimony from him could be harmful to his case and could tend to incriminate him. However, the Michigan Court of Appeals has ruled that a district court judge abuses the court's discretion if it prohibits a defendant in a preliminary examination from testifying. Therefore, I'm in defense of my client's right to testify. I'm respectfully asking that the court allow Mr. Shiffer to be sworn under oath and offer his testimony in the narrative.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor. I would just obviously ask that the defendant be limited to these events.
The testimony will be allowed in the form of the narrative, and it needs Mr. Shiffer to be limited to the incident and the events which brought you before the court today, okay? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. You can proceed.
Opening statement here. I am retaliating against the entire Michigan judiciary. I am retaliating against each and every prosecutor in Michigan. I am retaliating against police personnel and prison employees. I am retaliating against supporters of Michigan's dysfunctional mental health code. I am retaliating against the Whitmer administration. Without being rudely interrupted, I want an opportunity to fully explain what I am doing and why I am doing it. I have a nasty case of PTSD. I am a crime victim with psychological injuries that remain untreated. My PTSD was recklessly inflicted by employees of state and local government, as
Your Honor,
well.
I am going to object. This isn't reference the dates in question.
Thank you. Mr. Schiffer, we gave you very specific directions that you're to testify about something relevant to this case in which brought you before the court today, okay?
It has to do with my PTSD.
Okay, but we're not here to talk about your PTSD. You're being charged with 1 count of false report of threat of terrorism.
Then I guess what I need to do is sit down with my lawyer and go over this 12-page testimony statement to weed out anything that the prosecutor might think is irrelevant. And my attorney has not been making himself available to me.
Do you need a moment to speak with your attorney?
It's going to take more than a moment.
Mr. Hess?
I mean, it'll take 45 minutes for me to read this into the record. And I would like to fully express myself.
Okay, well, it's 12 o'clock. We can recess for lunch and you can talk to your attorney while we have lunch.
Your Honor, with respect, there was an objection before the court. I've asked the court to rule on that objection as to whether Mr. Schiffer is allowed to testify outside the scope of the matters of the events in question.
Okay, well, I gave an instruction prior to him beginning his testimony that his testimony needed to be relevant and it needed to be combined to the events that were currently before the court. He has what he says to be a 12-page document that he wants to read into the record, and he needs your assistance as to narrowing down to what's relevant and what's not. So that's what he's seeking now. So as to the objection is sustained, and I'm going to give him an opportunity for his request and stand to review his 12-page letter with you in private so that you can advise him as to what areas of this 12-page document you believe is relevant to the incident in question and what's not.
As Mr. Schiffer's attorney, Your Honor, I will meet with him to review this document. However, it remains against my express advice for Mr. Schiffer to offer any testimony.
Okay, well, that's been noted. He still has the right. And so that doesn't mean you can't counsel. You still have a right, you still have a duty to counsel.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so he just needs to know what is relevant to this particular case. And you may determine upon reading the 12-page document that the PTSD somehow correlates, but I can't determine that. I don't see anything about this case that would make me believe that that's relevant to this incident. But you should, have you read this 12-page document?
I have read the 10-page version of it that was prepared ahead of time. I guess there are 2 more pages on it. May I make an offer of proof to the court?
What is that?
Offer of proof regarding why Mr. Schiffer thinks his testimony is relevant.
Okay, please do.
Mr. Schiffer is a former prisoner and parolee. He believes that his time in the prison system resulted in his diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Because of his current condition and what was inflicted upon him in the prison system, he is a prison reform activist. He believes that these communications to Ms. Martin had the effect of getting her attention and getting the attention of the government as to his prison reform ideas. However, as his attorney, I'm disputing that these are terrorist threats. So that's the PTSD is describing Mr. Shiffer's motivation for sending these communications to the police social group.
Oh, sounds good. And as it relates to the 12-page document that he seeks to read, you believe all portions of this 12-page document are relevant to the incident today?
I do, Your Honor. However, they describe everything in great detail and at extreme length.
And that's what your objection or your concern was about him reading that?
Yes.
Okay.
As I said, Mr. Shiffer read the 10-page version of it to me. That took about a half hour.
And you don't know what's in the last 2
I do
pages?
not know what's in the last 2 pages.
You think you want to read those before he proceeds to read them into the record, or does it not matter to you?
Everything matters, Your Honor. It's against my advice, so I feel helpless in that sense. Mr. Shiffer has overruled my advice.
I recognize that. Okay, you can proceed to read your letter, sir. I'm going to allow it.
So go ahead and proceed.
His attorney is not having a good day.
My preliminary examination testimony
Buckle
all
up,
relates
by the way.
to what I just mentioned, to the deterioration of my mental health, to the absence of PTSD relief, and to my proposed PTSD healing solutions. My 12-page testimony statement will take over 45 minutes for me to read into the record and includes multiple crime confessions, motive, intent, moral perspective, commentary on my state of mind, legal and political agenda, vision, and future plans. Having said that, let me now begin my 12-page statement as it relates to this matter and my statewide campaign to kidnap certain employees of local and state government.
Admission
Page 1.
1.
My name is Barry Shiffer. I am guilty of solicitation to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel,
3,
and Michigan Supreme Court Chief Justice Elizabeth Clement.
4.
I have launched a statewide campaign to kidnap every Michigan judge
5.
and every Michigan prosecutor.
Times I
They
don't know
are
how
all my
many.
crime victims because they are all guilty of felony obstruction of justice in the Michigan judiciary's unconstitutional war on jury nullification, jury veto power, and jury rights. Every judge is a guilty perpetrator. Every prosecutor and assistant prosecutor is complicit. The Michigan governor plays a minimal role because Gretchen Whitmer condones the conviction, integrity, and difference, turns a blind eye to the miscarriage of justice, and callously ignores the cries of distress from its incarcerated victims. The Ingham County 54A District Court Judge and the Livingston County Assistant Prosecutor are both crime victims of domestic terrorist Barry Shiffer. The Constitution does not allow for a crime victim to judge the accused in a preliminary examination, and the Constitution does not allow for a crime victim to prosecute the accused. This creates a constitutional crisis, and the only way to end this constitutional crisis is for the judge, prosecutor, and criminal defense attorney to act as mediators and negotiate a peace treaty with the Gretchen Whitmer administration.
Correct.
The apartheid regime characterized Nelson Mandela as a domestic terrorist, but he was unconditionally released in February 1990 after both sides agreed to a peace settlement. That said, it will not be safe to unconditionally release this domestic terrorist from custody until after the Gretchen Whitmer administration ends the PTSD neglect crisis behind bars and stops the conviction, integrity, and difference.
I don't
I'm
disagree
an
on
injured
that.
crime victim of judicial obstruction of justice, and I have a nasty case of PTSD with no relief in sight. Denied a fundamentally fair jury trial in November 2009, I was wrongfully convicted of medical marijuana possession and falsely imprisoned 11 years for resisting
Wasn't
arrest.
medical marijuana back then, though.
2 Lansing Police Department officers violently seized my PTSD relief pain medication in February 2009, and I reacted in self-defense. prior to November 2009, prior to my November 2009 jury trial, Ingham County Circuit Court Judge Rosemary Aquilina implicitly threatened to punish my lawyer if he attempted to zealously present a complete and effective defense against oppression by the government based on the jury nullification doctrine. As a result of that obstruction, my 12 incompetent jurors failed to serve as a check on official power, failed to prevent the injustice, and failed to protect me from government tyranny.
He just
14 years later, I am now guilty
insulted hundreds
of
of thousands of
solicitation to
people in one
kidnap felony
statement.
perpetrator Rosemary Aquilina and LPD employees. Page 2. Accused of domestic terrorism, I have 5 affirmative defenses that the Livingston County Assistant Prosecutor wants the Michigan judiciary to unlawfully obstruct.
Yes.
Number 1, defense against obstruction by the government based on the jury nullification doctrine. Number 2, defense of others. Number 3, permission defense. Number 4, necessity defense. And number 5, justification defense. Since this is a harmless act of domestic terrorism, Nelson Mandela and America's founding fathers are all sitting at the defense table because they would not unlawfully obstruct the presentation of my desired defense. Furthermore, I cannot get a fundamentally fair jury trial in this matter until after the Whitmer administration formally ends its unconstitutional war on jury nullification, jury veto power, and jury rights. Nelson Mandela and America's founding fathers gave me permission to commit this victimless political crime. I committed this victimless act of domestic terrorism.
Hold up. Okay. So the founding fathers, of which is like my 6th great grandfather, did not give him any permission. They're all dead. Hate to break it to you, my dude. Didn't happen.
In defense of the dissatisfied Michigan taxpayers that needlessly finance mass incarceration. I committed this Nelson Mandela crime in defense of 30,000 Michigan prisoners with untreated PTSD. I committed this Nelson Mandela crime in defense of 20,000 incarcerated victims of conviction, integrity, and difference in Michigan. I committed this Nelson Mandela crime in defense of 10,000 needlessly confined Michigan prisoners. I committed this Nelson Mandela crime in defense of former Michigan prisoners whose PTSD was professionally inflicted in the courtroom and or behind bars, in defense of disproportionately incarcerated
on behalf of
in defense
others.
of current and future criminal defendants, and in defense of wrongfully convicted prisoners that are denied relief. Roughly 20,000 Michigan prisoners were denied a meaningful opportunity to zealously present a complete and effective defense against oppression by the government based on the jury nullification doctrine, including those that were bullied into accepting a plea agreement with intimidating threats of an enhanced sentence.
It's kind of a fair point, though.
There is a PTSD neglect and mental health care malpractice crisis in all 28 prisons of MDOC Director Heidi Washington, and ignoring this crisis is like ignoring the Flint water crisis. Sound the alarm. I belong in a Gretchen Whitmer prison with 30,000 Michigan prisoners with untreated PTSD. That's the end of page 2. PTSD is recklessly inflicted in the courtroom through unconstitutionally unfair criminal prosecution tactics, such as the unlawful prohibition of educational jury nullification-based criminal defense arguments that restrict free speech and render unlearned jurors incompetent. PTSD is also recklessly inflicted behind bars in Michigan through prisoner abuse, oppression, and the unnecessary micromanagement of 30,000 confined souls. I am in love with 30,000 Michigan prisoners with untreated PTSD.
Okay, so you can't inflict PTSD on someone. That is, it's a result of a single traumatic event, ongoing traumatic events. We're talking war. We're talking sexual violence. We're talking on, like continued domestic violence or child abuse, but you don't inflict the PTSD itself onto someone. And if someone is having a PTSD reaction to someone or something, it's not necessarily that person that they're reacting to. It's the trigger to something that happened before. I will not discount the fact that many prisoners do have PTSD when they get done with prison. They are living in like a constant heightened state of awareness, watching out and make sure like they're always having to watch their back. So on that aspect, he's correct. Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure he probably does have some PTSD. You'll hear later on where he spent most of his adult life in and out of the prison system. So I'm sure he does. He also has some other interesting things, and he's in love with 30,000 people. I'm pretty sure that's illegal.
I am the #1 cheerleader for 30,000 Michigan prisoners with untreated PTSD. I am in a relationship with 30,000 Michigan prisoners with untreated PTSD. It is an honor for this friend of Nelson Mandela to risk my freedom in support of 30,000 incarcerated victims of conviction, integrity, indifference, and/or PTSD neglect. To further demonstrate my support of 30,000 Michigan prisoners with untreated PTSD, this domestic terrorist is willing to spend 27 additional years in prison, which was the duration of Nelson Mandela's life sentence. Nelson Mandela is now deceased and has passed the torch to Barry Shiffer. Long Walk to Freedom is the title of Nelson Mandela's autobiography. Nelson Mandela was my favorite domestic terrorist because he authored the standard minimum treatment of prisoners, which the United Nations ultimately adopted. I was authorized by Nobel Peace Prize recipient Nelson Mandela to act as accused because employees of local and state government defiantly refused to repair the psychological damage that they professionally inflicted without compassion or remorse. I am denied compensation for my pain and suffering. I am homeless. I am a habitual shoplifter in Lansing. I struggle to survive outside of prison without a source of meaningful income. I need an honest paycheck. I belong in a Gretchen Whitmer prison because I am a prison peacemaker. Again, I am a prison peacemaker. End of page 3 through page 4. I'm a whistleblower, and I am publicly exposing the conviction, integrity, indifference, PTSD neglect, and judicial obstruction of justice of felony perpetrators Gretchen Whitmer, Dana Nessel, and Elizabeth Clement. I've spent a grand total of 28 years behind bars since 1985. I have never tasted success. I have 0 enemies in Gretchen Whitmer's 28 state prisons. Nelson Mandela created prison peace in South Africa, and future Michigan Department of Corrections Director Barry Shiffer expects to one day create prison peace in Michigan. I deserve an opportunity to publicly prove to Michigan's entire labor force that this ex-convict can outmanage current MDOC Director Heidi Washington, because Heidi Washington mismanages both the behavior of 30,000 state prisoners as well as the $2 billion annual corrections budget, which is financed by by Michigan's entire labor force. I had permission from America's founding fathers to commit this victimless act of domestic terrorism because the Whitmer administration will not give me permission to personally visit all 28 Heidi Washington prisons, meet with my 30,000 confined brothers and sisters face to face,
because you're
and spark a statewide prison peace celebration. I am hijacking all 28 Gretchen Whitmer prisons in protest. I deserve to eat Heidi Washington's garbage prison food with disproportionately incarcerated people of color. I am a Caucasian Black Lives Matter sympathizer. In People versus Thomas, 438 Mich. 448, it's a 1991 Michigan Supreme Court case law. Felony obstruction of justice includes oppression, and tyrannical partiality of judges, justices, and other magistrates in the administration and under the color of their office. Gretchen Whitmer is guilty of conspiracy to commit felony obstruction of justice. Gretchen Whitmer belongs in handcuffs.
Oh,
Gretchen Whitmer does not deserve a fair trial because this former marijuana prisoner was denied a fair trial in 2009. Beginning of
Before
page 5.
she was even governor. She was
Michigan governor, Michigan attorney general, and Michigan Supreme Court chief justice
she's in the
all
House
need
of
to spend
Representatives,
24
I think,
hours
back
at the
then.
Huron Valley Women's Prison in Ypsilanti with female prisoners that were denied access to fundamental fairness in the courtroom and denied access to PTSD relief behind bars.
If he's talking about
They're
what
all
happened
guilty of
post-COVID,
obstruction of
yes, I
justice
agree.
and have earned the right to wear a prison uniform, eat garbage prison food with disproportionately incarcerated women of color, and listen to the horror stories of female prisoners that are denied mercy on their sentence commutation applications and motions for relief from judgment. Accused of domestic terrorism, this student of Nelson Mandela is demanding an all-black jury after my all-white jury wrongfully convicted me of marijuana possession 14 years ago in the courtroom of crime victim Rosemary Aquilina. I am guilty of solicitation to kidnap any Caucasians that are sworn to serve on my jury on this domestic terrorism case. 12 African-American jurors should pardon me on conscientious grounds because the 20-year maximum possible penalty for this victimless text message is excessively harsh. White people inflicted my
To be
PTSD,
fair, most
not black
of the leaders right now are female.
people
in
of
Michigan.
color are now my peers, and I want a jury of my peers because people of color are more competent and have a greater sense of justice than white people. Caucasians are to blame for the disproportionate incarceration of African American victims of PTSD neglect in Gretchen Whitmer's 28 state prisons. Sound the alarm
But she's
so
only
that
been
first
the
responders
governor
can hear the unmedicated
2016.
cries of this victim of PTSD neglect.
I think it was 2000.
I'm an injured crime victim, and I am denied access to the soothing effects of THC, such as marijuana edibles. Therefore, it is not safe to release me from my cage in the Ingham County Jail until proper medication is provided. I am denied access to proper treatment in the Ingham County Jail. I am professionally mistreated by Ingham County Sheriff Scott Rigglesworth. I have a nasty case of PTSD, not multiple mental illnesses, as alluded to by Lansing Police Department Social Work Supervisor Jessica Martin. I was not born with a mental illness. My PTSD was willfully inflicted by employees of local and state government. I have spent 2 decades in a cage for victimless political crimes related to the unconstitutional prohibition of
Unless your
certain
last
drugs.
name's Aquilina.
I am mentally disturbed by how I have been professionally mistreated. That has been misdiagnosed as multiple mental illnesses by incompetent mental health evaluators.
So I want to touch on, he keeps talking about his multiple or mental health diagnoses. So one of the hallmarks of people that are mentally ill is denying the fact that they are mentally ill. I have just like downed way too much caffeine because my mind just went blank. Shoot. That is one of the hallmarks, is if you can admit that you might be mentally ill, like you can acknowledge that that's a possibility, then that is acceptance. So the fact that he is so strongly denying that there's even a chance he has any mental illness, while also not recognizing the fact that PTSD is also a mental illness, just to me speaks volumes. I guess he's being housed in the Ingham County Jail, not the psych ward. I don't know. I'm assuming they've already had a competency hearing for him. I have to go in and look. This is a case that I want to try and follow if I'm able to. I would like to see about getting a camera and getting media coverage or media access if they allow it. It may not be allowed, but this is definitely one that I want to follow because it's kind of near and dear to me.
No government-approved drug exists that will magically cure and reverse the trauma inflicted by government employees. I am in unmedicated pain and denied PTSD relief. This is started page 6.
It's
Accused
page
of
6 and it's
domestic
complex somewhere.
terrorism, I could no longer tolerate the unmedicated pain, the PTSD neglect, or the conviction integrity indifference, so I revolted by sending those disturbing text messages to Jessica Martin about my peaceful pipe bomb campaign against the Whitmer administration. Jessica Martin ultimately provoked me by ignoring my cries of distress and turning her back on me. I lied to Jessica Martin about the presence of harmless sticks of dynamite because Jessica Martin knowingly lied to me in a December 2022 text message related to an involuntary hospitalization ambush by her LPD government employer. My PTSD is worse thanks to Jessica Martin. She seems to think that my PTSD will heal after community mental health employees put a Band-Aid on the psychological wounds.
But
Jessica Martin also
isn't a
seems to
Band-Aid.
think that my PTSD
That
will
won't
heal
it, that's for
after
sure.
psychiatric hospital employees
Ugh.
literally stab me with a needle against my will and force feed me antipsychotic drugs that make my PTSD worse,
Due to
not
your
better.
behavior?
After Jessica Martin's lie in that December 2022 text message, I was involuntarily hospitalized and suffered physical pain when McLaren Hospital security guards violently forced me into 4-point restraints after I reacted to their initiation of physical force in self-defense. Jessica Martin's paycheck defrauds Lansing taxpayers because she is a part of the problem, not a part of the solution. Jessica Martin has poor listening skills. Having said that, I am now guilty of solicitation to kidnap Jessica Martin, my latest crime victim.
Letting me know that
Evacuate Lansing City Hall. Evacuate the 54A District Courtroom of Kristen Simmons. Evacuate LPD Downtown Precinct. Call the bomb squad. There will be consequences if I am mistakenly released from jail before the Whitmer administration agrees to end the PTSD neglect behind bars and stop the conviction integrity indifference as it relates to the judiciary's unconstitutional war on jury nullification, jury veto power, and jury rights. Thou shalt not release me from jail until there is a peace treaty. Beginning in December 2013, the Michigan Parole Board of Chairman Brian Shipman repeatedly characterized me as a threat to public safety and denied parole until my November 2019 release. The Michigan Parole Board of the Whitmer administration then decided that it would be a good idea to return me to the city of Lansing without survival skills, without effective psychotherapy counseling, without effective PTSD relief pain medication, and without survival money. That demonstrates their utter incompetence.
No,
this
that
begins page 7.
Is just the state of
Alert
how
the
things
media.
are with our
The media needs to publicly explain to dissatisfied Michigan taxpayers, injured Michigan crime victims, and 30,000 Michigan prisoners with untreated PTSD what I am trying to accomplish through this prosecution. Am I free to act above the law? Why haven't I been arraigned and charged with solicitation to kidnap every Michigan judge and prosecutor, including employees of the state Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, and Attorney General's office? How am I allowed to get away with launching a statewide campaign to kidnap felony obstruction of justice champion Gretchen Whitmer? This is not fair to the men that were recently convicted of conspiracy to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. Shouldn't I be punished with them?
You guys.
Created while I was falsely imprisoned on a resist arrest charge related to the unconstitutional prohibition of medical marijuana, I authored Michigan Jury Duty for Dummies, and I am currently trying to make a free electronic copy of my 208 question true or false quiz available to every dissatisfied Michigan taxpayer, every wrongfully convicted Michigan prisoner, every incompetent juror, every member of the Michigan bar, every Michigan legislator, every Michigan judge, every Michigan prosecutor, etc. I want Gretchen Whitmer, Dana Nessel, and Elizabeth Clement to publicly take my 208 question true or false quiz under the scrutiny of every criminal defense attorney and appellate attorney in Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer owes me 208 correct answers. Former medical marijuana prisoner Barry Shiffer is the teacher. Gretchen Whitmer
It
is the
wasn't
student.
medical want.
I want to give Gretchen Whitmer
It
a
wasn't
day off.
medical when you
I
were
want to
convicted,
become the
too.
Michigan governor
No.
for one day. And I want Gretchen Whitmer to spend her day off with incarcerated victims of conviction, integrity, and difference. You can find my Michigan Jury Duty for Dummies publication on my Facebook page. This begins page 8.
When you get through all the rest
I want to
of
help
the grants.
30,000 Michigan prisoners make amends wherever necessary. I am trying to improve the quality of life in all 28 state prisons. I need for Gretchen Whitmer to empower me to succeed. Imagine all 28 Gretchen Whitmer prisons erupting in celebration. My mission is to publicly teach the Whitmer administration how to successfully repair a rigged jury trial system with my Michigan Jury Duty for Dummies 208 question true or false quiz. I am trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to end the judiciary's unconstitutional and highly illegal war on jury nullification, jury veto power, and jury rights, which is my area of expertise. I am trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to make criminal jury trials fundamentally fair again and end the conviction, integrity, and difference, which inflicts PTSD in its victims. I am trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to stop the PTSD neglect and mental health care malpractice crisis in all 28 state prisons. I am trying to teach future MDOC prisoner Gretchen Whitmer how to stop the prisoner abuse, oppression, and unnecessary micromanagement of 30,000 confined human
You
beings.
just said the
I am trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to
governor's
eliminate
future
the
prisoner.
toxic environment behind bars and replace it with mental health stability, emotional wellness, and PTSD healing celebrations in all 28 Heidi Washington prisons. I am trying to rescue 10,000 needlessly confined Michigan prisoners by demanding 10,000 Gretchen Whitmer sentence commutations and executive pardons before Christmas morning next year in lieu of fundamentally fair criminal prosecutions and retroactive good time legislation. I am trying to transform Gretchen Whitmer into America's most merciful governor. I am trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to meaningfully reduce Michigan's violent and property crime rates. I am trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to transform 30,000 Michigan prisoners into 30,000 crime prevention activists. Gretchen Whitmer and future MDOC Director Barry Shiffer are jointly calling a statewide timeout on violent and property crime.
Now he's
Gretchen
gonna be, like,
Whitmer and
running
I
the
are
prisons,
publicly
apparently.
encouraging 30,000 imprisoned crime prevention activists to speak up, get vocal, and amplify my voice so that thugs, gangbangers, and other criminal perpetrators in all 83 Michigan counties will hear about our statewide campaign to stay out of jail free. I'm trying to help Michigan legislators inspire an MDOC oral reading of Michigan's criminal laws so that Michigan's entire prisoner population can help the Whitmer administration publicly teach lawbreakers an academic lesson on our state's statutory prohibitions. I'm trying to help Gretchen Whitmer inspire an introduction to criminal punishment course for our various school systems to add to their curriculums. I am trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to safely end mass incarceration before Christmas morning next year, and thereby save dissatisfied Michigan taxpayers at least $500 million on the $2 billion annual corrections budget. I'm trying to help felony obstruction of justice perpetrator Gretchen Whitmer install a restorative justice program for crime victims in all 28 state prisons. I seek No, I demand truth and reconciliation from the Whitmer administration on behalf
What
of the
do
victims
Clay?
of conviction, integrity, and difference. I am trying to help the Whitmer administration create a Michigan Jury Duty for Dummies Education Day so that members of the Michigan Bar Association can help educate current and future jurors that may not be competent enough to know their rights, political role, ethical duty, nullification prerogative, veto power, etc. I'm calling a statewide timeout on both prison violence and MDOC suicides, and I need Kristen Simmons to speak up, get vocal, and amplify my voice. Timeout on both prison violence and MDOC suicide. I'm trying to publicly teach Gretchen Whitmer how to create America's safest and most humane prison system. I'm trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to transform 30,000 convicted felons into 30,000 harmless human beings. I am trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to create America's most therapeutic and peaceful prison system. I'm trying to publicly teach Gretchen Whitmer how to transform Detroit into America's safest major city. MDOC prison peacemaker Barry
Good
Shiffer
luck with that one.
is calling a statewide timeout on gun violence in Michigan. And I'm also calling on 30,000 Michigan prisoners to speak up, get vocal, and amplify my voice across the state. I'm trying to help the Whitmer administration end the disproportionate incarceration of people of color. I'm trying to properly feed 30,000 confined souls because they deserve better than Gretchen Whitmer's garbage prison food. I am trying to make amends with the people of Michigan for my ugly past, and I seek forgiveness for my criminal sins. Imagine
for the
zero
tip.
homicides in Michigan next week.
Definitely. Thanks for watching.
Imagine zero rapes and zero child sex crimes in Michigan next week. Imagine zero assaults, zero armed robberies, and zero home invasions in Michigan next week. This begins page 10. I'm trying to teach.
Okay, he's saying let everybody out of prison right away, but also tomorrow there will be no more crimes. I hate to say it, but if you let all these convicted criminals out, they're probably gonna go ahead and do more. This just the recidivism rate is really, really high. Especially to say like there won't be any more child sex issues tomorrow. Unfortunately, that will not ever end. So his goals are a bit unobtainable.
The Whitmer administration how to dismantle Michigan's unconstitutional drug war in the jury deliberation room and replace it with drug war peace and POW release. I'm also trying to teach Gretchen Whitmer how to replace drug prohibition with drug liberty and justice for all peaceful drug users. This friend of prison peacemaker and Nobel Peace Prize recipient Nelson Mandela wants the Whitmer administration to email an electronic copy of my Michigan Jury Duty for Dummies 208 question true or false quiz publication on Facebook to all 30,000 Michigan prisoners via jpay.com. Every jailhouse lawyer in all 28 state prisons needs to proofread, scrutinize, and critique it. Every incarcerated victim of conviction, integrity, and indifference needs to take my quiz, including prisoners that have excessively harsh sentences, wrongfully convicted prisoners that have been denied parole, and falsely imprisoned convicts who have been denied excessive executive clemency without a supportive recommendation from the Michigan Parole Board of Chairman Brian Shipman. I'm publicly picking a fight with Michigan taxpayers because they needlessly finance mass incarceration. Having said that, I want 12 taxpayers to serve on my jury, and I want them to celebrate prison peace in Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer's cellmate at the women's prison in Ypsilanti was former Lansing resident Cypress Lockett, a female Michigan prisoner with a mandatory life sentence that was denied a fundamentally fair jury trial some 25 years ago. Cypress Lockett is guilty of stealing my heart.
Here we
Cypress
go,
Lockett
guys.
was sentenced to death by incarceration after her 1998 cocaine-related homicide conviction in Ingham County. Cypress Lockett needs for someone to tell her about Barry Shiffer's rescue plan. Cypress Lockett can help heal my psychological wounds. Cypress Lockett and I are not allowed to communicate with each other because the Whitmer administration has characterized me as a threat to the
No
security
kidding.
of our prison system. Cypress Lockett and I belong on WLNS TV6 Crime Stoppers
Local news
with our
channel.
public plea to local thugs, gangbangers, and other criminal perpetrators.
I'm pretty sure they won't.
On behalf of Cypress Lockett, I'm calling a citywide timeout on violent property crime in Lansing. I love Cypress Lockett. Alert the media.
Been alerted.
I'm America's most harmless domestic terrorist. I am hijacking the Michigan Center for Forensic Psychiatry, hijacking Michigan's dysfunctional mental health code, and hijacking every psychiatric hospital in Michigan. I am seizing control of all 28 state prisons and taking 30,000 prisoners hostage with the intent to treat them with an abundance of kindness. This begins page 11. Why
Almost there,
must I
guys.
force my way back into prison? Heidi Washington requires me to terrorize, bully, and threaten my way back into the prison system so that I can visit my confined brothers and sisters face to face, share a meal with them, and encourage them to celebrate prison peace in Michigan. The Whitmer administration has required this particular convicted felon to commit a new crime and reoffend. I am a freedom fighter and an authentic American patriot, and I am trying to remain as harmless as possible, but I belong in a Gretchen Whitmer prison as a prison peacemaker with or without an honest paycheck. In fact, I am willing to spend the remainder of my life in prison and willingly rot behind bars with other convicted felons that are denied a second chance, denied forgiveness, denied mercy, and denied humane treatment. I feel 100% free to suffer with those that are mistreated. My Michigan Jury Duty for Dummies 208 question true or false quiz belongs in every jury deliberation room in all 83 Michigan counties, both because Michigan's jury oath is unconstitutionally vague and because coercive jury instructions manipulate clueless jurors that do not know about their rights and authority over the judge.
He's
Having said
literally
that, 20,000 incarcerated
bashing
victims
millions of
of
people.
felony obstruction of justice and conviction
One
and
breath.
integrity indifference are denied access to restorative justice and truth and reconciliation because the entire Michigan judiciary defiantly refuses to accept responsibility and make amends. Future MDOC prisoner Gretchen Whitmer needs to formally pardon Barry Shiffer, just like the apartheid regime pardoned Nelson Mandela before his unconditional release from custody.
I knew it was coming.
Beginning of page 12, the final page right here. There is nothing evil or sinister about my victimless pipe bomb campaign or harmless evacuation orders. I am a former drug war hostage and a former political prisoner of war. My mission is to make amends for my ugly past. But Gretchen Whitmer is my #1 political crime victim because the Michigan governor does not genuinely care about the judicial obstruction of justice, the felony false imprisonment, the conviction integrity indifference, the excessive crime rate, the drug war violence, the unnecessary mass incarceration, the mistreatment of prisoners, the suicides behind bars, the prison violence, the PTSD, or the garbage prison food. Nelson Mandela and America's founding fathers all sit at the defense table, not at the prosecutor's table. In closing, Ingham County 54A District Court Judge Kristen Simmons is my crime victim and a crime victim has no constitutional authority to either dismiss the domestic terrorism charge or to bound it over to circuit court. Again, I need for all of you to serve as mediators, and the best way to resolve this constitutional crisis is for the defense attorney, the prosecutor, and the judge to negotiate a peace treaty with Gretchen Whitmer and the Whitmer administration. Sound the alarm, alert the media, spread the word. The end.
Cross-examination.
Very briefly, Your Honor.
Woo, that was a lot. So he who says the governor's gonna be in prison, right? Hasn't stated a single crime she's committed. And before anyone comes at me in the comments, I'm sure, you know, there are different. I know there's different sides, and they're gonna have opinions on that stuff. I'm not talking about that. I do want to point out that Gretchen Whitmer was an attorney, or she is still an attorney, and before she ran for governor, she was sitting as the head prosecuting attorney for Ingham County. She took over when the old prosecuting attorney pled guilty to human sex trafficking. So she came in and she did clean up house a bit. So we'll just say that, like, his bigger beef ought to be with Stuart Dunnings, not Gretchen Whitmer, because Stuart Dunnings was around when he was convicted all those times before. But let's finish this off. There's a little bit of funniness here at the end.
What was your name, by the way?
Tracy.
Tracy Meyer?
Isn't it true you sent a text message to Jessica Martin?
Yeah, multiple.
And isn't it true?
For the past, there's an entire year's worth of text messages.
Let me narrow it down. Isn't it true that on February 10th to about February 13th of 2023, you sent messages to Jessica Martin making threats against Judge Aquilina in particular?
I don't know about the word threat. I sent the text messages, yes. I acted as accused. I cannot.
You say you acted
I
as a
cannot
what?
say I cannot say they were threats.
You say you acted as a what?
I acted as accused.
Okay. You acted as accused, meaning you made a threat.
No, I sent the text messages.
Okay.
And isn't it true that in your text message, it said it was an unlit stick of dynamite?
Yes.
And you did that knowingly, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that it wasn't.
I admit that I was drunk, but.
Hang on, wait, I'm gonna ask questions.
Oh, okay. Yep, fine.
And you understand that that was taken as a threat, correct?
Right, all right, yeah.
And you understand that you didn't have it was a false report, correct?
Yes.
And you knew it to be false.
Jessica Martin lied to me, I lied to her, yes.
But did you know that the threats that you made on or about February 10th, 2023 to about February 13th of 2023, you knew that those threats of the bomb or the unlit bomb was a false threat, correct?
You're using the word threats. I don't agree to your definition.
Do you agree with me that that
Bust
text
out
message
Black
sent to
Swan
Judge Aquilina
Dictionary.
could be received as a threat?
Depending on the interpretation of some. One man's freedom fighter is another man's domestic terrorist.
Correct, but the text message indicating that you sent an unlit stick of dynamite to her, do you agree with me that that could be perceived as a threat?
Some people would, yeah.
And you sent those words.
People in law enforcement, yeah. Democrats and Republicans are going to perceive it that way.
You sent those words to her, correct?
Yeah.
And you knew that
Normal
It was
people would
false,
perceive
correct?
it that way, yes.
I'm nothing for
Continue to Director Byan at all?
Your Honor, as before, I have no questions to ask Mr. Shiffer.
Mr. Schiffer, you can be excused from the witness stand. Any additional defense witnesses or exhibits at this time?
We rest our case, Your Honor.
Any rebuttal witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
You can proceed to argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. According to the Michigan Criminal Jury Instruction 38.4A, the elements are that the defendant communicated by speech, writing, gestures, or conduct. I think that's evident by people's exhibit 1 and 2, the first text message, and then the litany that followed after those. The second is that during the course of the communication, the defendant reported that an act of terrorism had occurred, was occurring, or would occur. I think those are again evident in the text messages that he sent unlit bond to Judge Rosemary Aquilina. And third, that the report was false, and the testimony Detective Sergeant Johnson indicated that nothing was found. They did respond appropriately, and again, nothing was found. And fourth, that the defendant knew it to be false, and they would submit to the court based on his own testimony and statements made in the text messages that those statements were false. So based on probable cause and the testimony of the credible witnesses of Jessica Martin and Detective Sergeant Johnson, we'd ask for divine this matter over.
Mr. Hess?
Yes, thank you very much, Your Honor. The court heard the testimony of Jessica Martin. The court heard the testimony of defendant Barry Shiffer. The court also accepted into evidence exhibits 1 and 2, which were testified to by Ms. Martin as text messages that she received from Mr. Shiffer, and testified to by Mr. Shiffer that they were text messages that were sent to Ms. Martin. The court heard a lengthy statement from Mr. Shiffer explaining his motivations for what he described were his actions. However, upon cross-examination, Mr. Shiffer would not admit that the actions that he took were threats of terrorism. Your Honor, that brings us to the crux of the court's decision today. The previously cited Michigan Criminal Jury Instruction 38.4A, communicating a false report of terrorism, under paragraph 3, lists the second element, which states that the defendant has to report an act of terrorism that had occurred, was occurring, or would occur. It is my argument to the court that in the context presented to the court today, the communications from Mr. Shiffer were the communications of a person who has spent more than 25 years in prison, a person who was a parolee, a person who, when discharged from parole, had no useful skills, nowhere to stay, no money, became homeless, started using illegal drugs. According to his own testimony, was drunk when these messages were sent. Mr. Shiffer believes that he has prison-inflicted PTSD. Apparently, the probate court and mental health professionals believe that he has other mental health issues. We heard that Mr. Shiffer has complaints about how he was treated by Judge Aquilina, that he has complaints about his unmedicated pain. He has complaints about Michigan's previous stance towards marijuana, which apparently resulted in his imprisonment, according to him, and he wishes for prison reform. Your Honor, the language used by Mr. Shiffer in these communications was edgy. Edgy meaning on the edge of illegal, but not necessarily illegal. Mr. Shiffer took pains in the text messages to refer to unlit pipe bombs, harmless pipe bombs, referred to himself as a prison peacemaker, stated explicitly the pipe bomb will not injure or kill Judge Rosemary Aquilina. In the email compilation of additional text messages, there's again a reference to an unlit pipe bomb, another reference to unlit pipe bomb, another reference to unlit dynamite, and harmless dynamite. The court accepted these into evidence, and of course the court may consider them in making its ruling. So I'm asking the court to find that regardless of all the other testimony, that the fundamental idea here that a threat of terrorism was communicated has not been proven to a probable cause standard. That these are the communications of a person who was suffering from homelessness, suffering from drug addiction, suffering from mental illness, apparently drunk at the time when they were issued, and therefore do not constitute the crime of communicating a false report of terrorism. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we argue at all?
No. Thank you.
Today was the date and the time that was set for a preliminary examination. At the time of the examination, the burden is on the prosecution to establish if there's sufficient probable cause that a crime was committed and probable cause sufficient to charge you, Mr. Shiffer, with a crime. This is not a trial. The burden is not for them to prove each element beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden at this time is just more than mere suspicion that a crime was committed. We've had testimony today from Jessica Martin, who is the police social worker for the Lansing Police Department, and she testified that on February 10, 2023, that she was contacted by the person she identified in the court as Barry Shiffer via text messages. Just screenshot of those text messages were admitted as People's Exhibit 1. And then we have a compilation of.
I want to say, if it weren't for Miss Martin, who is the Lansing Police Department's mental health counselor, Barry Shiffer would probably be dead at the hands of law enforcement with the threats that he's texted in. And it would have escalated their response completely differently if it weren't for her. So for him to say she's part of the problem, no, she's actually probably saved his life. And more departments need to look into getting mental health professionals on the department to respond to individuals like this, to help keep these situations from escalating, because clearly this kind of got nipped in the bud rather quickly. It happened over a weekend. So yes, I gotta give her, I don't know her personally, I've never spoken to the woman, but it seems like, what she's doing is exactly what is needed.
Messages also reported to be from Mr. Shiffer, and that's in People's Exhibit 2. And then we have testimony today, after waiting is right from the defendant, Mr. Shiffer. We also have heard some testimony from Detective Sergeant Troy Johnston in relation to responding to the alleged threats. People's Exhibit 1, the text messages from Mr. Shiffer, which he admits to sending, amongst other things on the record, that he states that he had sent unlit pipe bomb to Judge Rosemary Aquilina. He told him to evacuate the Ingham County Circuit Courthouse, and then also some dynamite, or specifically,
It was harmless dynamite.
unlit or harmless dynamite was sent to the court as well. He also makes reference in the text messages about a solicitation to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer and MDOC Director Heidi Washington. And makes multiple references to himself being compared to a domestic terrorist. So he himself identifies as a domestic terrorist in these text messages. And
Yes, he
said
does.
his favorite domestic terrorist is Nelson Mandela. The jury instruction as read by the prosecution is that of Michigan Jury Instruction 38.4A. And it states, first, the defendant must have communicated by speech, writing, gestures, or conduct. And second, that during the course of the communication, the defendant reported that an act of terrorism had occurred, was occurring, or would occur. And an act of terrorism means committing a felony crime. In this case, the allegation was sending dynamite or a bomb to the court and telling them to evacuate the court. Because of that, knowing that it would cause, or it would be dangerous to human life, with the intent to intimidate, frighten, or coerce the civilian population, or influence or affect the conduct of the government or unit of the government through intimidation or coercion. third, that the report was false, and fourth, that the defendant knew that it was false. I heard the testimony again of Detective Sergeant Troy, who said that there had to be resources deployed as a result of the allegation or the threat of a bomb, a pipe bomb and dynamite being sent to the courthouse. And that the statements that those items were unlit does not stop the law enforcement from having to respond in the same course. It also needs to be reiterated that what the court perceives as a threat states here that they need to evacuate the Ingham County Circuit Court. Based on the 12-page testimony, I guess, that was reported to describe why this action was taken. I think that the action was taken because the defendant himself wanted to intimidate, frighten, coerce the civilian population or influence the effect of the conduct of government. With that being stated, the court is satisfied that there's sufficient probable cause as to count one. That will be bound over to the circuit court. A bind over date is April 26, 2023. That's the date.
One of the circuit court judges is Rosemary Aquilina. She was
will be
one of the circuit court judges.
a pre-trial. I'm inclined to believe that they'll be seeking to find another courthouse for it to go to and not be bound over to the circuit court in Ingham County. So that bind over date may or may not be changed. I don't know which court will take this case, but I'm inclined to believe the 30th Circuit Court will be recusing themselves from this case.
Judge, can I approach with a signed copy of information for you and for defense counsel?
Phew.
Thank you.
So here's just the tiny minutia
People are
of
making a request to add a habitual offender fourth offense notice. That will be granted. This will be bound over as a habitual offender fourth offense notice. That enhances your penalty to life if primary offense was
yes.
penalty of 5 years or more, 15 years or less if primary offense was penalty of under 5 years, and the maximum penalty cannot be less than the maximum term of the first conviction. That will be incorporated in the file. Bond was originally set at 7,010%. Are we addressing bond for any reason at this time?
I would like to, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you. I was made aware of a kite that the defendant sent indicating there was a solicitation to kidnap Ingham County 54A District Court Judge Kristen Simons, the Livingston County Assistant Prosecutor that was assigned in that case, and every employee of the Michigan Attorney General evacuate the courtroom of Judge Kristen Simons and call the bomb squad. Solicitation to kidnap Judge Kristen Simons. Based on this conduct that he continues to do while incarcerated, and the fact he's just found bound over, I asked the court to increase the bond to $50,000 cash shirt.
Well, I don't know if it says Simons, but I'm Judge
sorry.
Kristen Simmons.
Sorry.
That wouldn't be a threat against me at this point. So
When you
I'm gonna let
mispronounce the
another judge
judge's name
rule
that
on
you're in
that,
front of, that's
'cause
pretty
I'm a
bad.
victim, in that alleged.
I apologize for me.
No worries. I don't know what it was, how it was typed, but I will note here that there's an issue addressing bond. Doesn't look like he's posted the bond as is, 7,010%. I'm not gonna amend the bond at this time. I think it's meaningful because he hasn't been able to post the bond as is. And so we'll continue bond as it is, and this matter will be bound over to the circuit court level. No problem. Any additional matters for the record?
Not many people.
I don't have anything further for the defense. Thank you very much.
Okay, you guys, you need to
You expect that to have a couple weeks. All right.
wait until the very end of this and listen to the kind of the jokes that are going on. It cracked me up so much last night. The heavy seriousness of this case with all of the bomb threats being made and active current threats he was making right there in the courtroom to this judge.
And watch, so that's what we're gonna do.
Please don't tell me we're actually evacuating. We evacuating?
Well, that's a good threat.
I'm evacuating for lunch, Ron.
Good luck with that.
But he found
Good luck
love.
with that.
But he found love.
Oh,
He
God.
found love.
How's that?
Okay. So, I can't see the screen. That was a very interesting case. It's an ongoing case. If you were reading some of the comments in the live chat that Lucy had said, there's not a lot of coverage on it in the media. I've heard a little bit about it, but it's because I live in the area, so I have heard some. But more than that, I've not really seen national coverage, although I will admit I don't watch a whole lot of news anymore because it's always so all doom and gloom. But anyways, if you enjoyed my video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, share this video with others, watch my other videos. I've got a lot. I think I'm going to edit this video this week and post it up, just the video itself. That way, if anyone else wants to use it, it will be available. I have to, it's recorded. I don't know. Anyways, so please, also the link is right here in the feed, or in that thing, the ticker is the link to my PayPal, because I can promise you this video is going to be demonetized. It's not been demonetized yet, but it will be shortly, because it always is. Yesterday's live stream was also demonetized. So if you would like to show further support and helping me out with my channel, there is the memberships that you can join, or I'm throwing down the link for the PayPal. That will actually help put, well, it will help me be able to obtain equipment so I can actually go and record hearings like this live, in not necessarily live stream them, but have them and then report on them later. And as that person said, I'm going to evacuate to eat lunch myself. Team McGwitch, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful Saturday. It is beautiful weather. I'm going to, after lunch, go get my hands in the dirt and to work on my garden. And you guys have an amazing weekend, and I will see you later.